Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about wildlife in Portugal, the kind of things that you're going to come across as you live here. I'm a resident in central Portugal, so I'll be looking at this basically from my own experience, both in terms of if you go out for a walk in the countryside, maybe through the forest, and also the things that you're going to encounter in and around your home. So first of all, let's deal with the wildlife that you might come across if you go for a walk in the countryside, through the forest, up on the hills or something like that. As some subscribers might be aware, I'm very fond of walking. It's not done for the purpose of losing weight or something, it's simply done because I really enjoy it. And I will walk usually for 2 or 3 hours a day, every day, in all weathers. I basically don't miss a beat. My dog isn't so keen on coming out in all weathers, like for example today it's drizzly, but anyway. So I spend a lot of time in the forest. I don't think there are all that many people who spend more time walking through the woods than I do, and I'll just share with you now the kind of things that I've actually come across personally during my walking expeditions. First of all, foxes, and I've come across a ton of these. I've had one in the garden once, and when I'm walking past farmers' fields, I frequently see them running there, but most of all in the forest itself. Unusually, because I grew up in the UK, I always thought that foxes were kind of a brown-orange colour, but here they tend to be more of a greyish hue. I honestly don't know why that is, grey and white. It's not a wolf, it's definitely a fox. It's far smaller than a wolf would be. And they always run away whenever they come across me. I have never felt threatened by one, definitely. On a number of occasions, I think there are 3 times now, I've actually had one dart out just meters in front of me. There was one occasion where a rabbit ran across my path, and seconds later it was followed by a fox that burst out of the hedge, took a look at me and then darted in the other direction. I guess maybe I saved a life there, I don't know. But yeah, I've come pretty close to them and they're not dangerous. Next up we have deer. Now I have neighbours who go walking a fair bit as well, and they've never seen one, but I see them almost all the time. Basically young immature deer, not very large. I don't know the gender of them because I'm not a deer expert, but I've got pretty close to them. Like with the foxes, there have been a couple of occasions where deer have just run out in front of me. It's only been like 5 or 10 meters and they've just crossed over the trail in front of me. And sometimes there are 3 or 4 of them, but they're usually alone. There was only one occasion where I came across a group of 3, and that was on a road, a small road admittedly, and it was very early in the morning. I came around the corner and there were 3 deer there. 2 smallish ones, looking fairly young, like Bambi looking things, and 1 big one. It must be considerably older. It was like triple the size of the others, and it had antlers. And it looked at me and they all just went off happily, because I think that was the only time where there could have been some danger associated with deer, because that one was certainly big enough to have inflicted damage on me if it wanted to. The only other danger associated with them comes from driving, and that's something that many people will be familiar with. I've had a couple of times when I've been on the road at night, not very late, only about 9, but it's dark, and a deer has run out into the road and just stopped there, and I had to brake very suddenly. One, I came within about a couple of meters of hitting it, but fortunately there have been no fatalities or damage. Next up we have the boar, the wild pigs that inhabit the woods. These are the firm favourite of hunters who obviously go out with packs of hounds and guns. I came across them this morning actually, looking for these boar. I've only ever seen one large boar that was dead, and it was massive. It must have been, I don't know, 100 to 150 kilograms at least. It was a large animal, but it was very much dead. As for others, yeah, I have come across them, always in the woods, usually in 2s and 3s, and they're very small. They're piglets, basically. They're maybe a bit bigger than a small dog at the time that I've seen them, anyway. And the response from them has always just been to run away. I've never come across a large one or a protective mother or anything like that. I've never heard of anyone who's been gored or attacked by a boar, although, you see some stories that are written in newspapers or whatever about people who are attacked by a wild boar, but they tend to be hunters who are pursuing the animal. Maybe it's been injured and it feels very, very stressed and anxious, and it turns on the people who are, in its opinion, attacking it. I certainly haven't felt threatened by them in the time that I've been walking in the woods, and I have a couple of neighbours who've met wild boar, larger ones, and the response was the same as with the deer. They just simply ran away in the other direction. When I lived in Figueira da Foz, I lived on the outskirts of the city, high up in the hill, and it borders onto a forest reserve there. And when I was out walking early in the morning, because that's my habit, I was out about, must have been about 6:30 or something, and there's just nobody else. Anyway, on that day, I came across a wolf. Now, it was about maybe 30 meters from me when I saw it. It didn't look like the kind of grey and white wolf that it didn't look like a husky exactly. The colour of it was more brown-black, but it was definitely wolfy. I mean, it had that kind of gaunt, wild look about it, and it just looked at me silently. It didn't bark or anything like that. I had a stick with me because I usually take one when I'm out walking just in case I do come across anything. It looked at me, I looked at it, and it just turned and went away. It didn't appear to be afraid of me. I was a little bit afraid of it. I can tell you it definitely wasn't a dog or a fox. It was the size of quite a large dog, and I am 99% certain it was a wolf. However, no harm done on that occasion. I hope I don't meet any others. As I said, that was in Figueira da Foz, which is quite far away from where I live now in central Portugal. I'm in Leiria. I haven't seen anything like that since I came here. Thank God. There's also a kind of a strange animal that lives in the woods. It's called an Egyptian mongoose. And the story I've been told is that there were too many rats at one time in this area. So because there were too many rats, the locals tried to introduce snakes to kill the rats. Fine. And then there were too many snakes, so they introduced these Egyptian monkeys, is that how you say it? To kill the snakes. Anyway, I'm not sure whether that's true or not. But there are a few of them in the woods, and they look odd. They're not threatening, they just run away like most other things. They kind of look a bit like a beaver, but they're black in coloration. And sometimes you come across them. If you see something odd like that, it's probably one of these. Talking about things that come from the forest or live in the forest that are harmful and that most people are going to hate, number one for me are ticks. I do try to avoid these. When I'm walking along a path or something and there's overhanging long grass, I tend to look and think, oh, are there any ticks there? Because if you get these on your clothes, then they'll probably get inside and they'll bite you. And when they attach, they really attach. I never had any experience with ticks at all before I came to Portugal, but since I've arrived here, I've had plenty of experiences with them, both in Figueira da Foz and here in Leiria. When I lived in Coimbra in the city, of course, nothing. But if you go walking in the forest, probably you're going to get ticks. If you go along forest paths anyway, if you stick to the roads, you'll probably be okay. And it's a problem for me and for my pet. I have a small dog and she does tend to attract them too. There are various different kinds. I'm no expert. There are bigger ones, which as far as I understand it are deer ticks, and then there are smaller ones which tend to be a reddish colour around here anyway. There are some that are black. I really don't know all the different species, but they all do the same thing, which is bite you and suck your blood. Whenever I come home from the forest, I always have to take off my clothes and check my body carefully just to make sure I didn't get one. I'm a bit paranoid about it. I do the same for the dog. But from time to time you miss one and you discover it several hours later, probably attached to you or the animal. And the solution there is to use one of these. It is like a tick fork, has a special head. You press it around the head of the tick and pull it out that way. It's the best way. You shouldn't use alcohol or anything like that, because if you do, the tick might basically spew stuff into your system, and that could potentially contain Lyme disease or other nasty things that you don't want. Lastly, coming to probably what is the most dangerous of all these animals, and that is the procession caterpillar, which is produced by the pine moth. This is a moth which lays its eggs high up in pine trees, and it develops into a nest up there. And the larvae, the caterpillars, they all come down at once and they form like a long line which can be meters and meters long, composed of hundreds and hundreds of individuals, and they cross the road. It can be quite an appealing sight, I suppose. I saw it once in Portugal, and that was near here. And I didn't feel very happy when I saw it because I know how dangerous they are. Luckily on that occasion I didn't have my dog with me because these are mainly a threat to pets. The spines on the caterpillar are highly toxic, and if a pet sniffs them or licks them or God forbid bites them, then it can lead to some really serious injuries, and part of the tongue or the nose having to be cut off or something like that. There was a South African gardener who ran over a line of them with a lawnmower, and he was in intensive care for quite a considerable period of time with his life in danger. They're quite toxic, and if you ever see them, avoid them. Go the other way. Just let them be and don't touch them, and above all, don't let any of your domestic animals come into contact with them. Moving on to talk about things that I've come across in my garden, in my house, or in the immediate vicinity of my house, the road outside and stuff like that. And there are quite a few animals that fall into this category. First of all, we have lizards. Now, of course, they're the little gecko-ish. I'm not exactly sure whether they are geckos or not, but the little really fast ones that dart around, they don't bother anybody. I've never had one in the house, but there are plenty of them in the garden. But there are also much larger lizards, and I've had 2 of them in my garden on separate occasions, and my dog found them both times and went absolutely crazy. Nothing bad happened, but I had to get it out of the garden. I didn't know what the hell these things were, but they were quite large, like this big. It's not a small lizard. One of them, after looking on Google, turned out to be an Iberian emerald lizard, and the other one was a jeweled lizard. Now, both of them were large, scary in a way that maybe people who come from the UK will only really understand. It's just like, we don't come across this kind of thing. It's just like this massive lizard there. And I was able to chase it out. One of them got out over the wall on its own, and the other one I had to help it with a dustpan and brush. I really hope they don't come back, because although they're fairly harmless or whatever, I really don't love them in the garden, I have to be honest. Next we have snakes. Now, Portugal has 11 kinds of snakes, only 3 of which are actually venomous. Now, I am pretty much unique around here because I've never seen a snake in my garden. All my neighbours have said, oh yeah, I had a snake in the garden. Some of my neighbours have like 3 or 4 snakes over the course of a summer. It's usually a summer thing with the snakes. And I've seen them outside my house, dead on the road. Some of them look like they've been killed by a cat. Others look like something ran over them, probably a car. Fortunately for this area, it's all the non-venomous ones. In actuality, most of the venomous snakes tend to be endangered in Portugal, and you're less likely to come across them. And beyond that, the incidence of the venomous ones in Portugal biting humans are rare. And even if you are bitten, the probability of having serious adverse consequences are quite low. If you seek medical help, then you'll be fine in most cases. It's not like a black mamba or a king cobra or something that lethal. What I tend to see in my own area are ladder snakes and horseshoe whip snakes. They're not very big, maybe a couple of meters long, the ones that I've come across, and mostly dead. Although I have seen a few in the forest that have still been alive, and again, like with most animals, when they see you, they leave. That's it. The next thing in the countryside is a real annoyance, things that fly. So we've got flies, mosquitoes, and I suppose we could put Asian hornets in this category as well. Now, I am not a big fan of flies. I hate them, and they are a plague in the countryside in the late spring and summer period. It's just awful. You have to keep your doors and windows closed, otherwise your house will be full of flies. Now, many Portuguese people and expats, they go out and they buy like fly repellent, something you plug into a socket, and I tried it, it didn't work very well, and I don't like the fact that, it's putting out some kind of toxin into the air and I'm breathing that as well. So I went the other route and I got mosquito screens on basically all my doors and windows. So I can keep my doors and windows open if I want, and we rarely, if ever, get flies, and we haven't had any mosquitoes this year. So the flies are just a bother, nobody likes them. You have big ones, you have small ones, it's not a good thing. No one's going to say, yeah, I really love flies, and I think that mosquito nets for me worked best. I mean, your mileage may vary, you may prefer another solution, but for me, I want them out of my house. I don't want them coming in at all. The same goes for mosquitoes. I don't like anything that bites me. Again, I don't think mosquitoes are popular with anyone. And since I put the mosquito nets up, 100% it's been fine. There aren't actually that many mosquitoes in this area anyway, but there are some. The first year I was here, I didn't put the nets up, and I did get bitten sometimes at night. They came in and I heard the bzzz in my ear. I had to get up and try to find it and kill it. And this year I've completely avoided that, so it's been a happier experience by far. As for the Asian hornets, every year you get like a leaflet put in your letterbox from the local government warning you about the dangers of these Asian hornets. And they are quite dangerous, especially if you're allergic to them. There are some in my area, not many. Whenever I see one, I do kill it, I have to admit that, because it is an invasive species and it's harmful to the honeybee population. I try to protect the pollinators that I've got in the garden. But to be honest, you don't see many Asian hornets here. I've only come across maybe 5 or 6 in the 1.5 years that I've been here, so it's not a big thing, but there must be nests somewhere around. One thing that I have had trouble with in the garden are voles. These are also called field mice. They're tiny little mice that burrow into the ground, and they make a network of tunnels. And what they do, at least in the case of my garden, is that they eat the roots of plants that we are trying to grow. My wife and I have ambitions anyway to be successful gardeners. We still have quite a long way to go on that. And we planted things like pumpkins and stuff, and our pumpkins became massive. They were great, so many leaves, so many flowers. We even had pumpkins on them, and then along came the vole and ate the root of the plant, and everything just died. And it did it with spring onions as well, various different types of green vegetables. It's not everything. I mean, it didn't annihilate the garden, but it ate maybe 40% of the plant roots, and it was quite annoying. The best solution for these is to kill them with poison. I tried traps, they don't work, but with the poison you have to be very careful, especially if you have pets. I have a dog, and therefore I didn't do it. Last year I had immense trouble with these. This year it's been a bit. It hasn't been as serious. I think it's because I have more plants this year, so I've noticed the losses less. Next up for the garden, especially on rainy days, especially in the spring, because there are a lot of rainy days there, you have the snail invasion. I have never seen so many snails. The pictures you're seeing now are actually from the fall, so it's not very serious, but in the spring, there are hundreds of snails. I mean, just walking on like the calzada or on the road outside, is basically like a massacre. I mean, it's very difficult to avoid crushing a snail sometimes. When you're driving, you know, you're killing lots of them because they're crossing the road. They're just everywhere. Big ones, small ones. They're just so numerous, it's almost unbelievable. And they get on the side of the house, you know, they try to climb the side of the house and on the windows and on the shutters and everything like that. Obviously, they're not harmful, but I mean, some people find it a bit disgusting, and my wife is definitely one of those people. Talking about things that actually get in the house, I would say there are two things. First would be spiders. Now, Portugal has three kinds of poisonous spiders, one of which only lives on the island of Madeira. So I'm not there, so I don't have to worry about that one. I think the other two are the recluse spider and the black widow. Now, I haven't come across either of these. The recluse spider, presumably because it's hiding somewhere, and black widow, I haven't seen it. I hope I never do. But what I do see are massive house spiders and just generally large spiders. And even though I've got all the mosquito nets up and everything like that, somehow they still manage to get in. Not as many as before I put the nets up, but still some. And I think they come under the garage door or something. Maybe the seal isn't perfect. You know, it looks okay to me and it keeps out larger animals for sure, but I guess these kind of insects have their ways to get in. When it's damp outside, you're going to see more of these. And if you hate spiders, well, I'm really sorry for you because rural Portugal has quite a lot of them. Along with the spiders, you get the house centipede, which is a venomous animal, but it's not dangerous to humans. It basically is a helpful thing. It goes around and kills other things that you might not want in your house. However, it does have a rather scary appearance with like 100 legs or something, and it will be the kind of thing that will freak out my wife, and she'll be screaming, kill it, kill it, kill it. So I do try to get them out of the house. Unfortunately, they're also very, very fast. And the same goes for the giant house spider. It's also very fast and it can jump around. So, I mean, if you don't like insects very much, you should be prepared for this because not only are they big, they have a lot of legs and they're quite quick. And probably they're going to freak some people out. Probably the worst thing that I've ever had that came in the house were ants. And this happened just this summer, and it was an absolute nightmare. One day, there were no ants. The next day, there were thousands of them, and they were just coming out of crevices that I even couldn't see that there was an opening there, but the ants were coming out of. And they were going basically throughout the kitchen in long trails. And I got some ant traps, they didn't work. And I was quite frantic about it. And my neighbour came over and handed me a lovely bottle of Fortana Bio, which is a kind of really, really toxic insecticide powder. And I am amazed with this stuff. I thoroughly recommend it. I put it down just basically where the ants were coming out of and across some of their trails, and it wiped them out. It wiped them out within an hour. They were all gone and they did not come back. Now, ants are a major feature of rural Portugal. The first year I was here, I didn't have them, and actually that's a bit of a miracle because everybody else I talk to it always talks about how in the summertime they get plenty of ants in their property, both on the outside and unfortunately in the inside. So if you're coming to live in central Portugal, Alentejo, the Algarve, anywhere that's kind of dry like that, because it does tend to happen during the hot summer months, you have to be prepared for dealing with potential ant invasions and to take appropriate measures. It's not something that I've ever had to contend with before in my life where I've lived, but it's the first time for everything, and at least next year I will be better prepared for it. The last thing that I've seen around my house, and it was actually sitting on top of a lamppost, which is just outside my house across the road, and I've seen it on a couple of other occasions as well, also sitting on walls or posts, is an eagle. Now in Portugal there are many birds of prey, things like hawks and owls and kestrels. I've come across them, you see them flying around, it's not uncommon. But this thing is massive. You know, it is an eagle of some kind. I am no expert on eagles, so I don't know what kind it is, but it is huge. It is a huge bird. In terms of the body size, I've never seen it flying, so I can't tell you about wingspan or something like that, but I can tell you that when it's sitting there on top of the post, it must be at least 70, 80 centimeters in terms of the height of its body. So it's quite big, and I don't even think that was a full extension. So it's a large bird. And this is something that worries me because I have a smallish dog. She weighs like 5.3 kilograms. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, I don't love it when that thing is around because it could potentially prey on my dog or the neighbour's cat or other small animals, obviously. And I don't want that. But there's nothing I can do about it. Obviously, it's definitely going to be a protected species of some kind. I haven't seen it at all this year. Thank you. I'm sure the bird watchers among the audience are saying, oh, you're so lucky you can see eagles. No, please, you can have it. I don't want it. I don't think it's a wonderful thing. You know, I feel threatened by it in some way. Not personally threatened, but for my dog. And, you know, it's something that concerns me that, you know, I would hate, there would be nothing worse than for your dog to be taken away by an eagle. Oh my God, that's just awful. But anyway, it's there, it exists. I suppose it's a threat. To be honest, there haven't been any reports in the area of pets going missing due to an eagle attack, so maybe I'm just overreacting. But I definitely think it's possible. And I have read reports on the internet of similar kind of attacks happening in the US or whatever, so I know that in theory it's possible. I just have to be careful. So that basically wraps up my review of animals and insects that I've personally come across or had experience with in Portugal. There are a lot of different types of wildlife in this country. I think the state of nature is pretty good in Portugal. And it's something that the nation should be proud of. Of course, there are always going to be animals that not everybody likes, especially the insects that not everybody loves, but we all just have to learn to live together, I suppose. And on the whole in Portugal, I'm very, very happy with you know, the natural environment here and the wildlife that I see. I think it's a fantastic place, and it's the best place that I've ever lived in my life when you think about the natural environment. So that'll do it for this video. I hope people found the content informative, and I'll see you soon in the next one.